Here we go. Right up my nose. I could speak then. Job done. You really wanted that detail, didn't you? So now you know why I got tissue stuffed up my nose. Right. Okay then. Anything you want to say, Henry?
Um, I came across an article on that Arco news site.
Yeah,
They've
that's useful, isn't it?
they've
Sometimes.
discovered in Romania, in the forest somewhere on a hill, 15 Iron Age stonemason tools. And
Interesting.
it's quite interesting because they look very much like modern day cutting tools of today.
And these are Iron Age.
They're Iron Age.
I tell you what, we'll go on to that in a moment. It's the Archeo News. If that's new, we'll be on there. Right. So anyway, we'll have a look at that in a moment. Right. Richard, anything from you?
No, no, nothing at all for me. Nothing
Well,
new
there
and
you go. We're going to go
exciting.
straight. What's that?
There's nothing new and exciting.
Well, there will be now because we're going to look on the Arco News and we're going to see if they're. Did you both have the newsletters that we sent in the post?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it came yesterday. I haven't opened it yet, leaving it as a surprise.
Well, maybe what maybe it might be not what you think it is. Right. So Archeo. So what we type in here, we're typing in um uh Archeo Archeo News. Do we type in Iron Age?
Yeah,
I don't know. Iron Age tools. Iron Age tools. Right, here we go. Oh my God, here we go. Is this the one?
no,
The
that's a
the
different one.
largest, mind you, I gotta say it, one of the largest and most significant Iron Age hoards ever discovered in the UK has been revealed. Ever. I think we actually did that, didn't we? We've done that. I'm
I
sure
think
we
we've
have.
done. Yeah,
Oh yeah, we've done that one. Yeah, we have. Right, so let's just go down Denmark.
it's Romania.
All
Uh,
right then. Romania. 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 Right there. Stations. That makes sense. That's the one. Got it. Consent. Okay. Right. So there we go. Okay. So Dacians, a state that existed just before the Romans. Um, they're obviously all hammered. So they're hammered artifacts rather than made in a mold. So you've got axes, you've got lump hammers, you've got normal hammers, or wedges there. You've got some nice wood wedges, which are actually very familiar. I was actually um, splitting wood in December, and the simplest wedges are the best because you get really complicated ones costing 10, 20, 30 quid, right? But just a simple iron wedge is ideal. And chisels there on the right as well. So we got a nice toolkit. And obviously this one's coming out late, isn't it? So it's 2022. So this an extraordinary discovery in a Romanian forest, unearthed pre-Roman. Dacia was the old sort of that the old province of that the Romans conquered, but the Dacian people. And there we go. A local villager stumbled upon the collection at the base of a tree near the main quarry face. The tools weighing a substantial 25 pounds appeared to have been recently dug up and abandoned, possibly by looters whose plan was thwarted by the sheer weight of their illicit haul. So yeah, that's really interesting stuff. Obviously, about 100 years BC, maybe. Do these date from? Or the quarry itself, near a quarry, bears the telltale marks of tools usage that ceased entirely after the Roman withdrawal in the 200s. And the diverse collection comprises of five double-headed picks, including 2 rare examples with toothed edges. Nice. That's something that you do see occasionally on modern tools. 5 splitting wedges, we mentioned that. They're saying splitting for stone, but equally you could use them to split wood. A whetting hammer and field anvil used for sharpening chisels, and single examples of a flat chisel at a point, likely used for intricate finishing work. This assemblage represents a comprehensive range of stone masonry techniques, from direct percussion using the picks to indirect percussion with the chisel and point. Cold sharpening with the hammer and anvil, and the force of stone splitting wedges. So that's a nice little piece. Thank you for that. So what we're going to do, we're going to move on to what we're doing tonight. Say hello to Baldrick. Hello, Baldrick. And let's do that. And we'll do there. Right. So there's Morgoth, the Dark Lord, our big black cat. And there's little Marley. Other than that, let's get to where we were meant to be going. So we're going to. So what I thought last week, we had too many images, and what I wanted to do was to finish those images this week. And Anne's just joined us. So I think the one image that we should start off with is one that we're familiar with. This was up in the north of the likes of Edinburgh and Glasgow, Perth and Kinross, and I wanted to show you this because we just finished on this last week, and this is an Iron Age field system. As we will know, we're very familiar in the Iron Age that they had field systems that were enclosed. They enclosed their fields in the Iron Age, probably to ward off against the ungulates, sheep and goats eating these very valuable crops. And when you think about it, as I've experienced myself, you can have one single sheep for a day, and a hedge that may have been 100 trees that you've planted will all be nibbled away. And one single sheep can have a devastating effect. It's a metaphor for the likes of having one fox getting into a coop and killing 30 to 40 chickens. I've also experienced that as well. Now, the point is, we also mentioned that if you want to compare this with the medieval period, for example, the medieval period was an open set landscape, which is basically, that's a medieval landscape, which is an open landscape, because there wasn't many sheep, cattle and goats grazing, and pigs and so on across the landscape, which is again very different from what we've got in the likes of the Iron Age, which had enclosed fields. But there's examples in southern Scotland of open fields, cord and rig agricultural open fields, where similarly to the medieval period where you've got the ridge and furrow, this was the equivalent of the Iron Age ridge and furrow, where you had some open fields, and these weren't grazed upon by sheep and cattle either. But mainly, as we'll experience from an example in Wales where we finished off on last week, we look at Blaen Rhondda, for example. There we go, Blaen Rhondda, where we've got this very similar thing to Scotland. In fact, identical patterns of Iron Age usage, where you've got little parcels of land which are enclosed for farming, and it's this is quite, what's the word, misleading. These look like very, very small fields, but they're not very small. You could, for example, plant a nice load of barley in there, for example, or in these enclosures. And then what you've got is evidence of housing and other structures and small folds to keep sheep, for example. So if you're enclosing crops, you need folds for the sheep that you don't want to be wandering around the landscape. And this is in Blaen Rhondda. This is up in the northern part of the Rhondda Valley, just before you go over the Regos and you go to Tower Colliery, for example. Now, one thing to remember is that the evidence that we have from the Iron Age across the Rhondda Valley is very, very limited because it's just been raped, wiped out, and destroyed by slag heaps, and later, um, much later mining. You know, this is a long distance when you're mining in the valleys in the early 1800s from the Iron Age, which is occurring at the birth of Christ, for example, 2000 years ago. And two things to be said about this. By the side of the road. So what you've got a place called Hen Mynydd, the Hen Mynydd car parks, and don't go there at night. Hen Mynydd car parks, and if you park there in the day and you look left and right, you can go across the road, go through this gate here, and you're okay to look at the archaeological monuments in the field. Now, this is a nightmare in archaeology to excavate anything like this. I certainly wouldn't want to be there excavating anything like this because it's just a pile of stones. I'm sorry to make it sound like that, but unfortunately, excavating something like this, you've got a curved profile where the walls have just disintegrated into this profile. So just rubbly stones around the landscape. Now, the landscape of Blaen Rhondda is a landscape that's been occupied and utilised for not just the Iron Age, but we've got evidence into the Roman period, into the Roman era, into the 200s, where we've got a little bit of evidence. So people have continued. So in other words, what we're seeing, and actually the earlier point that we mentioned, the Dacian landscape of Rome into Romania, where it become part of it become a Roman province. What we're looking at there is that lots of people just would have continued being Dacians. And when the Romans had left, they continued to be Dacians and started quarrying and so on. And using the landscape as they had before. And this was very similar to what we're looking at Blaen Rhondda, and very similar with what we're looking at the same practice in Scotland, where we've got these enclosed fields, which weren't all woodlands and forests that lots of historians talk about. It was very much agricultural landscape for the Iron Age. It may have attracted the Roman administration for a short time until they realised why these people have got these small fields, simply because of the wind and the conditions within the landscape and the damage that a single animal can do. Now, the way you may have created a wall back in the Iron Age, for example, is quite simple. Let's just do a little bit of a demonstration. So this is what these would have ended up into. But to start off with, if we clear that, a standard wall may actually take the form of a load of field rubble. And then what you're going to do to ease this and build it up, best thing to do, what you've already scraped out the ground, you get a nice little bit of a turf on top of that one there. And then what you have is more rubble on top of there. And what you're going to do, again, you're going to put another little bit of a turf on top. It's a really good way of building it. I've actually built a wall like this. And what happens, you can build really tall walls using this technique. And then eventually, what you've got, let's just finish this little bit. Yeah, obviously, you're going to have more courses than that. What you might then do is you're going to put a bit of a beam on there. And then you're going to have a bit of a timber roof member, all bound together with trusses, and that's going to be a simple structure, and that's going to really work well. Actually, what I should have done, that should have had a diagonal profile like that, and basically coming down. But unfortunately, then later in the archaeology, what happens is simply as the sods of earth degrade and the grass degrades and are eaten away and stuff, the wall then has a curved profile like that, which is a nightmare for archaeologists trying to reconstruct these things. It really, really is, because they're not rectangular or square, hewn, angular stones. So the one thing that we've got to always remember is that things are not as easy to understand when we look at something like this, but it just gives you a good idea, a good impression of what I've just been talking about. So what we've got is normal aerial photography. There we go. And this is photography, looking using this technique when you've got snow up in these upland areas. Just fly. Don't. Well, obviously, I'm not a fan of drones, not a fan of metal detecting. But if you've got a light aircraft, you can fly above it. There we go. You can get some good definition of the archaeology. And there's many more of these settlements up there. This is actually Blind Wander number 2. There's a Blind Wander number 1 as well. I have written about this, a couple of pages in Romans in South Wales as well. So again, moving on again. This is where we've got Blind Wander, and these are what lots of the walls look like. And again, trying to communicate with this, with what's going on. This is exactly the same way people are going to be building in Scotland when they've got these wonderful types of arrangements. And if you're ever up there, very much recommend that you have a good old look at something that is very ancient. It's very accessible as well because it's there. And the one key aspect of this is, and what we're going to do, we're going to mention again, we're going to chuck the sheep in here as well. There's one point. Sheep have probably been grazing here since the Iron Age. And why do I know that? You can see them in the photograph. But these there we go, these little white dots. But the point is as I've in traveling to places and listening and talking to people, you learn a bit of wisdom. And I remember saying, I've mentioned this last week, I remember saying to my university lecturers, Simon Clark, why aren't there many more trees on Orkney and Shetland? Why are there very few? And he said, what are those? And I said, they're sheep. And he said, that's the problem. Because you could have many trees colonizing the whole of these islands in Scotland, but as soon as you get a small band of sheep, right, all your trees are gone. You're not going to have anything growing. And this is a sign now that that since clearing the land, since humans have cleared the land, the sheep have just grazed it out. It's gone. You can't. The sheep have grazed it out. And is this a good thing or a bad thing? We're not here to discuss that tonight. But what you could argue is that by the sheep grazing the landscape, it's meant that we're seeing the archaeology. By sheep grazing the landscape, it means that the roots of the trees ain't into the walls, destroying them. But also the walls are exposed. So you've got one evil after another there, So, so again, appreciating something that's very close to us. But one point to be made is I've misled you because we're not just looking at an Iron Age landscape. We're looking at buildings that were reutilized in the Roman era. We're talking about buildings that were reutilized in a medieval period. And no doubt, maybe there may have been a little bit of usage of these buildings in the 1700s when people were adapting to changes within the landscape. So these have not only typically survived because of the sheep grazing, these have, and there's no tree roots. These are typically survived because they've been reused over the process of time. But the template for what we are seeing is typically an Iron Age template. It's just that people have reutilized, and what's there might be many different periods of use. And when we think again about Tim Ingalls, the idea of lines and the idea of how things integrate, I was doing a little bit of research for my little series that I do on YouTube. It's more occasional than ever. I used to do it every day. But I thought, right, why don't I just look at a little bit more looking at Cornwall again and see if I can find any more Roman era stone remains in Cornwall. And I found a standing stone which had inscriptions from the Roman period on it. But I thought, why don't I do Carnyenny? And Carnyenny is an Iron Age village, but it was reused and utilized with some changes in the Roman era. And I thought, can I get away with that? Because it's principally Iron Age, but it's Roman as well. And I'm thinking about that one. But you do see my point there. And again, looking out over this bereft derelict, empty landscape. To be honest with you, um, I think these landscapes are ugly and bereft of life. I think there's nothing appealing about them at all. I'm a big fan of trees. I'm a big fan of woodland and seeing green trees. I'm always depressed when I go to landscapes like this, but it's good for writing books. With one book that I've got coming out soon, and but this is not a portrayal of what these people would have lived in the past. You know, the Iron Age. These people would have been surrounded by trees. Right? It's
Where,
only because of changes that this has occurred and quickly.
when we were in Exmoor, there was a medieval, well, it was medieval, because I said to Joe, I said, is that Iron Age down there? So I suppose it must have been, like, might have been Iron Age once, but it was a medieval village. Oh, no, I don't, well, it was a village
No,
anyway.
no, no, Anne. We agree with you. That's perfect. You don't need to say any more. You're
See,
right, Anne.
yeah,
Leave
okay.
it. Leave it. You're on a run. It's fine. I love that. That was good. You did really well there. So again, this is a different system, a medieval system, rather than Iron Age system. And what I just basically did was I did I put a couple more slides up here, and I said, look, what we've got is that when you think of this is referred to as coaxial field systems, which is basically um, a very complex system of field works within Salisbury Plain, for example. And the one thing that we've got there is that you've got, you could almost say that the black lines are your medieval field system, and then the red sort of fields and stuff are sort of a bit of prehistory, a bit of medieval, and so on. And you could also argue that those black lines also represent part of an Iron Age system as well. So it's really difficult to really work out what's going on there. And what Anne's point is so right. It's so complex. It's so complex what you're seeing within this one image, trying to describe what you're seeing. And the problem is trying to describe what you're seeing. Are the black lines medieval? Are they prehistoric? Are those little red sort of enclosures, are they all Iron Age? Or are some of them medieval? Or are some of them from the Roman period? And this is the problem. We can't date rubble walls with nothing in them. If there's nothing to date the walls, if you know there's no if there's no
Buildings.
diagnostic, there's no set building formats, you know, there's no, then makes the archaeology really difficult to work out. And this again, this is in Northumberland, prehistoric ridge cultivation. Again, this is to deal with collapsing environmental conditions. And one of the things that we need to be thinking about is that when people are farming in upland areas and when they're using these field systems that are enclosing them, unlike this is open, people are rather desperate and they're doing absolutely anything to control the environment. And again, the complexities of trying to see the prehistoric world, the Bronze Age, and then going into the Iron Age, trying to understand the complexities, because again, not everything on that image is from one single day. It's from over, if not thousands of years, that we're seeing this template on the landscape, and in some ways an exhausted landscape. And there's one other thing to say. If this is an archaeologist's interpretation, and if this is completely correct, then I've got no reason to doubt it. If this is all we've got on this set landscape, for example, in East Sussex, and it's all prehistoric, why? And it just makes you think it might be because people are dividing the landscape, subdividing it, making it much smaller and so on. And it was just failing. It was failing over and over again, and hence the landscape was abandoned. And this is exactly the same formula
Mhm.
when we go back to say something like this, that technically, right, that this medieval landscape, why does it still look medieval? Why is it looking still medieval? Why hasn't heavy agriculture from more recent times abandoned all the medieval ridge and furrows from early years? It had in lots of other areas, but this was probably the last stab in the medieval period to tame what was left of a landscape that was absolutely exhausted. And again, I think one of the earlier points when we were talking about field systems and how we look at field systems again, Dartmoor, is that the reason why we've got early prehistoric field systems surviving is because nobody else has done anything there since. Or if they have, they're just grazing sheep. They've just abandoned those landscapes. And this is a really, really important point. This is a really important point to remember that we've got a landscape that is set in aspic and stuck in time, except when you look at Blind Rhondda, and we look at what we've just seen in Blind Rhondda, what they've done, people have continued to use that landscape. But what they haven't done with, say, this Dartmoor landscape is that they've just abandoned it because they just can't do anything with it anymore.
Yeah.
And, you know, one thing springs to mind, Dan, is that could I survive in a landscape like this? Well, the first thing I would do would be to dig a large hole in the ground, and I'd have an underground greenhouse, right? Which would be ideal. Like we've done that here. But I would have my little Jackery generators, right? Which would have little solar panels that could move around, and we would have another subterranean building which would deal with the winds, but that's still not taming the landscape. You're still not planting the trees to deal with the landscape because you've got grazing sheep. Even if you start planting trees on a landscape like this, you've got to plant millions of them, right? Because trees establish on a rota of little growth. And then one tree gets bigger, it protects the other tree, and then the other tree gets protected. And this takes a long time. And we haven't got to that stage where we as human beings can tame the landscape again. Because the only people that can tame the landscape is Mother Nature. Because we've had our chance at taming the landscape, we've ripped all the trees out, and then we've done this, and eventually it's failed. And that's not an environmental leftist lecture, that's just reality. So again, it's talking about coaxial field systems and how all these sort of intermingles in different parts of Britain. And again, up in Northumberland, where instead of having these intermingled fields, so what people have done, again, an explanation, a little bit more of this, is that you're subdividing and overdividing and making the best of the land and constantly and making things smaller. This is what this is. And then what you've got is, again, in Northumberland, you've got, instead of an open landscape of ridge and furrow, what you've got is these enclosed field systems, where again people have got these field systems to try and deal with subsidence of soil. You've got trying to deal with animals, you're trying to deal with the wind, all these different things. And again, eventually, this was a system that no longer worked anymore. So moving away from this in a moment, because we're going to get to my next subject of charcoal. And I do believe that Richard wants us to be finished by 9. I want to be finished by 9 as well. So we will have a little bit of a break, and that's where we're going to finish at 9. But again, in Somerset, you would think that Somerset, there would be open fields. For example, in the medieval period, is this very similar to the Iron Age? They'd enclosed fields in Somerset. Why was that? Maybe it was to do with dampness, maybe it was to do with flooding, maybe it was to do with different environmental conditions that you don't have, say, in the middle part of the country where you've got something like Warren Percy, where you've got all these wonderful ridge and furrows landscape in the medieval period. And mention Warren Percy again because in the 1950s, when it was excavated, it was the archetypal medieval landscape. So what we're talking about here, which could be typically not just from the 1700s, not from the medieval period, you've got what's typically referred to as lynchets, which are basically subsidence movements on the landscape. So what's happened is that we know that this was an open landscape at one stage, an open farmed landscape, because without walls, without ditches, the landscape subsides, and these things here are called lynchets, right? So basically, the process of a lynchet is where if we've got a bit of a slope on the landscape, right? So what's going to happen is, without barriers in the way, the soil subsides, and what will eventually happen is something like this, and then the soil subsides here, and what's going to happen is there's going to be, basically, the soil builds up and eventually it loosens and then it moves again. So this is soil creep. This is soil movement on the landscape. You know, typical A-level geography question. And this is basically what's happening. These are what the lynchets are. So the lynchets are a sign, again, that this is prehistoric activity that wasn't enclosed, which is, again, very different from the enclosed landscapes of Blaen Rhondda and the upper parts of Scotland. And again, looking for these clues within the landscape is very, very important. That's sort of one thing that I've been doing for the past few days. I was recording an old trackway, and I thought, oh, well, what is the trackway still doing there? Because it was sort of hidden on the side of the road. It wasn't wide enough, so he decided to build a new road. And it was great recording that. And again, it's good to find little bits of the old landscape that are still with us, because in the main, this is typical what you might find anywhere across Britain. Most of the ways that people used to use the landscape have completely changed. And what you then have is that you've got an older landscape which is superimposed by barriers. That's actually happening in Derbyshire here. So we've got a couple of little images I want us to look at. But before we actually get there, just this is a little bit of a take here. So earliest field systems in Britain may date back into the Bronze Age, or actually earlier, much earlier. And one of the things that this is actually saying, this text, which I'm not going to read out in full, is that we know that people are farming the landscape, not just from a Neolithic context, which we're looking at, for example, 6,000 years ago. We might be talking of somewhere in a region of 8,000 years ago. We'll get the first inklings of a Mesolithic farmed landscape. And what we might find is, for example, this is what this text is saying, we might find a Neolithic mound, a Neolithic burial chamber, right, which has been placed directly on top of a Mesolithic farmed landscape. So what they're going to do, they're going to pile their earth to create their barrow, and that barrow, constructed nearly 6,000 years ago, they built that directly on an earlier farmed landscape. So when archaeologists are excavating, looking for layers, they find the minute traces of humps and bumps of an earlier ridge and furrow landscape, not from the Neolithic period, but from the Mesolithic period. So the archaeological features are preserved under mounds, and that's exactly what this is basically saying. And it's talking about the large range of landscapes that we got, from isolated landscapes to open landscapes to enclosed landscapes, these coaxial field landscapes where everything's sort of intermingled or all mixed up. And again, all these different phases that cut into different phases of the landscape are very much present in our British landscape today. Oh yeah, I was shouting and screaming at the chart. I thought I interpreted this chart wrong when I added it, right? Because I thought I thought this is going to be a nice little timeline where it's going to actually show, for example, in the Iron Age, for example, it's going to say, oh, we've got lots of enclosed fields in the Iron Age. It's not showing on that. And we're going to have unenclosed fields in the Iron Age. It's not showing on that. So it's really not useful at all, this chart. However, it just sort of gives you an idea quickly that when archaeologists interpret the landscape, you've got lots of different types of landscapes. You know, open fields, you've got unenclosed fields, you know, specific maybe with an indication, some kind of a barrier, which might be a slight ditch or stuff. But when you've got enclosed landscape, you've got really firm ditches, you've got really firm hedges and banks and so on. And different names for understanding the landscape. Oh, but this is another interesting thing, right? Oh God, can I be a bit cheeky? I actually I hang on a minute. I've got an image over here, right? Which I put back in the bag, right? And this image itself dates from the 1970s, right? And this could be interpreted as a cairn, right? But it might actually just be a pile of stones. And what I'm blithering on about and what I'm talking about is that when archaeologists look at piles of stones in the middle of a field, right, they might not be burial cairns at all. They might just be a pile of stones piled up in the middle of a field because they're clearing stones from a field, right? You know, people when they're farming a field, right, you get lots of stones and left over from the last glaciation. So you pile them up in the middle of a field. And lo and behold, what archaeologists have done, they've inadvertently, right, interpreted piles of stones as cairns. And I've got an image of one of those examples in front of me, an original photograph, which I will show you, which is near Garn the between Kefin Coedacuma, on the A470, right? And the archaeologist working on this site was using manpower services training scheme volunteers. So obviously, back then in the 1970s and 80s, the state was paying for people to work in archaeology as volunteers, but they would pay them, right? Don't get them off the dole, basically, give them an extra tenner a week. And on this specific site, the archaeologist was given was basically told, look, there's something in the field, dig it up. And they found out it was just a pile of stones piled in the middle of a field, right? But for the archaeologists to continue with their funding, the archaeologists had to say it was an archaeological monument so they could get the funding to continue working on the site, right? Which is dangerous because they falsified the archaeology. However, so that's a very interesting thing. So cairn fields, piles of stones in a field, just because they look like a pile of stones from the Iron Age, doesn't mean to say that they're actually anything special other than a pile of stones. Again, ancient tree. I don't know if any of you are watching my videos, but this is a really nice tree near the Kefid Mably at Michaelston of Edu, northeast of Cardiff. And it's a tree that when I was standing there, orgasmically looking at it, the owner of the pub come out. She said, "Oh, we how old do you reckon this tree is?" And I said, "I've been looking at it, studying it." I said, "It's 600 years old." She said, "Nope, it's been dated to 700 years old." And I thought, "Oh my God, it's good to be wrong." And anyway, I was invited back there for a meal with Michelle because we were filming there at the time. Anyway, I thought I'd do a bit of name dropping there. So
how old? Sorry, how old was it?
about 700 years old.
Oh, right, okay.
Basically, it is one of the oldest oaks in Wales. And actually, weirdly enough, I went to a little there's a place called Randurwyn, which is near Llandovery. So this is outside Cardiff. So Randurwyn outside Llandovery. I just went there the other day for a little bit of a break, and and
Mm,
there's this
nice.
tree. There's this tree down the lane, right? And I just thought, wow, and you can actually get inside it. So I done a video on that, and strangely enough, I then thought, all right, if I go out the top of here and go right, I'll come back to Randerwin. Bad mistake. I was driving around for like 30 minutes, completely lost in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, so what we're going to do now? We're going to look at charcoal burning, and oh, Matt, Anne, I didn't show you that earlier on.
Huh.
There's Morgoth.
Oh, oh, gosh.
He's our
got
big,
big feet.
yeah, he's Morgoth, the big black cat, and
Oh.
there is Marley, the little black and white cat.
Oh.
Right. So when I do go filming to do some work in the States, apparently we've got you down to look after those two cats, Anne.
Oh God.
And little baby Idris. Oh, love.
Oh, I'll have to see you about that. I'd have to come down there.
Oh yeah, you would. You'll have to shack up in the camper van, Anne. That'd be great. Mhm. So yeah, I've already worked it out. I've already worked it out. I've got my passport. I've got my I've basically taken my passport, my credit card, a mobile phone, and a lead, and that's it.
And when you going?
Oh, I shouldn't be talking about this anyway. You can look after Idris, Anne.
Well, you haven't got your Esther yet.
Esther. Yeah, you got your Esther.
I've got to have my Esther.
USA, is it?
Yeah.
USA. Actually, I might just go via Canada and bump into Owen and just jump over the border.
Yeah. Well, its trouble is, right?
Go on, Anne.
Mari did this, but she had to go. She was going from Montana to Calgary, so they went through. They went through the national park. But I think they might have somewhere on the east side as well. Oh, I don't know. Oh, sorry.
Why are we even talking about this? Shut up. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Next time, right? I'm not mentioning the States. People just get too excited with it, right? No, I am not. I'm not going to take over food packages for your daughter, Pat.
Just say you're going to Canada.
You got to cross the border. And they're really mean. Ask these questions like, "What is your status?" And I thought, my status? I don't know what my status is. You know, I'm married. You know, but that means whether you're a U.S. citizen or UK citizen or what you are.
What I'll say, I'm a Muslim fanatic, right? And then they'll let me in.
Locked up.
No, probably let me through. Anyway, look, right, okay, we're doing charcoal. We're doing charcoal burning.
You gotta go to
so.
Forest of Dean for that.
I was talking about the Forest of Dean lots last night. Charcoal burning, right? So I did last night. Last night I basically started off by saying, look, we will just give you a load of blurb and a table, which was the previous one. But I wanted to basically I do you a little bit of a lesson about what happens when you're charcoal burning, right? Which I do. And I'm just going to show these images first. So I'll just give you a few clues. This basically, a charcoal burner is basically, sometimes there's a little bit of a pit in the ground known as a pitstead. You stack up your shanks of wood, not horizontally, but vertically and diagonally, right? And then we'll do a few more details when we get to it. And then what you've got to do, you've got to reduce the flow of oxygen into this chronically. And because you need to create charcoal and not basically ash. And then you cap it with the clay capping and you sammle it. Basically, sammling it is where you cap it. And we'll talk about that. And there, the clamp in the ground where you might use. And basically the one thing with charcoal burners is a really complex piece of technology, right? And there's our charcoal, and there he is. And then we get to this at the end, hopefully. Right, so anyway, crack on. What we're going to do, we're going to go to this little table, right? Quite useful. And we start off in Germany. And oh, yeah, guys, I had something very terrible to happen last night. Anne, do you want me to give you a confession?
All right.
Right, I went to a McDonald's last night, right, on the way back from filming in Bristol, right, and it was rather late, and obviously I was traveling back late because I taught my the class on a Tuesday in somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, I went to this McDonald's outside Bridgend, and I thought, right, okay, so I ordered a McPlant burger, right, so I'm sat in the car park there and I'm eating away and I'm thinking there's something weird about this McPlant burger because it's like there's a bit of burger and there's a bit of bread and there's another bit of burger and there's bread and I'm mentioning it and thinking this doesn't taste right. It tastes like real meat, right? But it just doesn't taste right. And I thought they'd give me an extra burger. I finished the whole thing off and I looked on the top of the box. They'd only given me a frigging Big Mac.
Good.
Oh, well, once won't matter.
Yeah, but oh my God.
Once in a blue moon. Now, don't be like that because my cousin was a vegetarian and she's older than you now and she does have a leniency every now and then. But she eats fish.
Well, how can you be a vegetarian eating fish? Anyway, right.
It's not your fault. They gave you the wrong one.
It is my fault because I got chatting with a woman behind the counter who's now a subscriber of mine on YouTube and blooming TikTok.
Well, that's all right then.
You have to pay.
Payment. Anyway, so right. Down payment. Anyway, look, so the point is what we're looking at. I'm going to mention this. So 2,500 years of charcoal production in the Low Countries in Germany, the likes of Belgium, Netherlands. So the study of archaeological remains of charcoal kilns is a fast growing field of research. We're not really understanding about charcoal burning as much as we used to, right? And here's a little weird fact. Coal, C-O-L or C-O-A-L, is actually the name for charcoal, right? So when we say charcoal, we mean coal, right? I know it sounds complex because people were referring to coal by name as in charcoal before people were using coal from coal mines. So there we go.
Oh,
so
well, I suppose that's understandable.
I'm glad, and you're very sensible tonight, understanding. You're very accommodating of my love. So based on a large number of radiocarbon dated charcoal kilns from Belgium and the Netherlands, what they've worked out is that there's a certain way of understanding these charcoal burning sites, and in fact, what they're saying is that it's possible that charcoal burning is a lot earlier than we think, a lot earlier. And charcoal burning still goes on today. It really, really does. So going back to these little load of notes, and Anne said earlier on the Forest of Dean, yes, there's lots of charcoal burning in the Forest of Dean, and also, I just had the name in my head. There's a place beginning with a B. You can actually go there in the Forest of Dean. And you can actually visit an iron mine. Oh God! Yeah,
right.
in the Forest of Dean.
Yeah.
I was going to do I was planning to do an archaeology recovery trip there once, and then I think I was outvoted, and we decided to go to Cornwall for the 20th time. Do you know, Anne? I think we did 3 archaeology recovery trips to Cornwall.
Yeah.
No, we did 4. I'm sure we did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Yeah.
And the last one, Pete was so upset he didn't go, but that was also the same one that Pat didn't go on, Sandra didn't go on. You know, there
Oh,
was
you changed, hadn't you? You'd sort of changed classes and things. So I think that's what did it.
no, it was COVID.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, that changed a lot of things, didn't it?
It did, it
Yeah.
did. So
You had to scrounge around for more customers.
exactly, exactly. Hey, and look, we're not getting anywhere now. Right, okay, going back to this. So
I gotta go and get a tablet.
oh my God. So before the large scale exploitation of fossil coal, so basically whenever you're talking about coal from coal mines, you should be saying fossil coal. And coal collected on the beach is known as sea coal. And coal, as in charcoal, that's what we're talking about.
Mm.
So you're going to get a tablet, Anne. So
Oh,
what? No, you don't have to. So the charcoal data is what we've got from this little table in front of us, and the charcoal residues preserved in the remains of charcoal kilns are frequently used to understand what people are burning, and it's very important to understand what people are burning, right? And before we talk about what people were burning, one of the things that we've started to do a lot more is use LiDAR imaging and aerial photography and old maps to understand charcoal burning sites. And actually, Archaeology Company was sort of involved in a LiDAR survey with Swansea University quite some years ago. And we went up to the Wet Luke Forest, which was a nice little bit of a survey looking for charcoal burning sites. Now, the one thing I would say is something that I've learned is the types of woods that people burn in our charcoal pits, charcoal burners. Now, one brilliant wood to actually burn is gorse wood. Gorse wood burns at a very, very high temperature uh, when it's ignited, or when it's in a charcoal pit. Ash is a really good material to create charcoal from. Also, oak is really good to make charcoal from. So you've got all these different types of wood. So when they're going back to charcoal burning sites, is to get a little bit of a cross section of the wood that they're actually burning. Now, this chart itself identifying charcoal kilns from over the years. So rectangular and square kilns are massive at the end of the Iron Age going into the Roman era. This is very similar to what we've got in Britain as well. So what we've got is the round pits, the round charcoal burning sites all the way from the end of the Roman era all the way into the medieval period into the 1400s. And then you've got so basically the rectangular ones are where you have a little bit of a clamp cut into the ground, whether it's rectangular or square, or you've got a round clamp cut into the ground. But the mounds themselves are not actually cut into the ground. They're above. They're stacked above. Nobody's taken anything away. And the reason why you cut these pits into the ground in the first place, the rectangular round ones, is that you've got to remove stones. What you don't want is to have the charcoal itself as it's being created as charcoal, heating up stone so much that the stones explode, damaging the kiln, which wouldn't be good. And one little thing here, two little things at the bottom, understanding, identifying these charcoal burning localities, finding them by chance on archaeological excavations. And then later, obviously, we're using LiDAR and field survey to understand somewhat other evidences involving charcoal burning sites. What we've got here as well is that we're using charcoal for the likes of forging. So when you talk about forging, you're not melting iron or making it molten. Okay, you've basically got iron objects that have been in small furnaces, then you're using charcoal then in the forging process. So you have a bucket of charcoal, and you nail your metal objects on tongs, and you place them in, heat them up, hammer them, maybe dip them in water again, annealing, hammer, and you shape the object. As we looked at some examples earlier on, and obviously bloomery furnaces, yeah, then you're using charcoal in bloomery furnaces. Charcoal, when it's created right, you can use that wood to get temperatures in excess of 1,490 degrees C, which is the ideal temperature for smelting iron. And then you've got blast furnaces, which is another process that was being evolved at the end of the medieval period. And I can just mention blast furnaces, a little fact about blast furnaces. This will be interesting for anyone doing a quiz in a pub in Wick. That I'm actually a little bit of a fan of what Henry VIII did to the monasteries. Part of me, and then the other part I'm not. And because the monasteries held a third of all the wealth in Britain that had been taken away from the king's control. Anyway, if that's a good or a bad thing, that's politics. But the one point is, if Henry VIII, in dissolving the monasteries, stopped the Industrial Revolution by up to 200 years. In other words, I would be talking to you on the moon by now, and the development, the evolution of human technologies would be 200 years advanced now if Henry VIII hadn't dissolved the monasteries. And what am I talking about? Well, some monks had already developed blast furnaces in Britain, nowhere else on the world. Well, when I say nowhere else in the world, that's not exactly true. India, China, but their technology was just basically localized. However, our blast furnace technology was being very much developed by the monks, and some of the monasteries that he closed down were on the edge of creating blast furnaces that would have ended up as advanced as the ones that they then developed in the late 1750s, 1760s, 1780s. And then we're talking about things like the Bessemer process, which is another lecture altogether. However, because that technology was stopped and those furnaces were destroyed and all the rest of it on monastic land, that technology didn't come around for about another 100, 150, 200 years. So you can see, if Henry VIII hadn't dissolved the monasteries in 1540, the Industrial Revolution would have taken hold in Britain 200 years earlier. There's a little fact for you. So what we're going to do now, I think I'm getting a little weather worn. So I want us to have a short break tonight, very much shorter than usual, because it would be good to finish at 9 anyway. But let's just have maybe a long enough break to boil the kettle. So I want you all back at 8:25, folks. We're going to turn this off. Any questions? Ask them now.
Nope.
Now. All right,
No.
then. All right, then. And go put your kettle on. You've literally got 6 minutes. Go on, do it. And you, Pat.
Okay.
Don't talk about the little people. real Hitler. Oh yeah, hang on a minute. Why don't I have? You know what? Right? Da, 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 da. Da, da, España. Ah. Let's get on with it, boys. Oh, there's no one there. For f- sake. I don't know why. I don't know. You guys, you're bloody amateurs. Honestly. I gotta bloody lie on the floor. Uh. Hello. I got the cat. Am I getting allergic to you cats? Bloody monster in you. Oh my God, there's a cat. I'm still bloody waiting for them. They're supposed to be back by now.
I was here.
Hang on, hang on, hang on. I just asked if there was anyone there and nobody was there.
I was there.
I was Richard. Is Richard all right?
Yes, it went well,
Oh, good.
but he's still got double vision. So I
Oh,
tell him his brain's got to work harder.
ah,
But he's got a good right eye and he can see. And we got to put drops in 4 times a day.
oh,
Yeah, yeah. And he's
yeah.
got to have a patch on his eye when he goes to bed for a week. You know, the plastic one, they have you sellotape it to your head. You know.
I sent you a message
I
because
did get it.
Oh,
Thank
you
you.
did?
Sorry. I just got it when I was, doing Carl. I don't look at my phone enough.
Did you have to go shopping?
Well, today, you mean?
Hmm.
Well, there wasn't food. We did food last night. Rian and I, our daughter
Oh,
and I
right.
went did some groceries at Lidl's. We hadn't done Lidl's before, so I wanted to see it and take time, so we went there. But today I had two dresses to return to Marks and Spencer at the designer outlet.
Oh, right.
But I took them back, and then I purchased the trousers, two dresses. I'm going to try them out, see if they're okay.
Oh, right.
Went to town. It was like, get ready for
I
your
was
day.
I was thinking about you, and I was thinking, oh, I should have got up today and got dressed and everything.
Yeah.
But,
But to take your dresses
Monday,
back from my...
Sunday and Monday, I didn't get dressed till 1.
no,
I had my breakfast at 1 and I got dressed at 2 on Sunday and Monday.
you sound like me, Pat. We're the same.
Husband was not impressed.
Monday. Well, I was thinking you said about going for coffee, and I was waiting to see what my cousin wanted, and she's not coming this week, but she's coming next week. So
You
I've
finished,
got
have you?
Where's she
Thursday
coming
or
from?
Friday, really. What did you say?
Where's she coming from?
Oh, Newport.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, you finished now, have you? Yeah.
Yeah. We've
It's
got
just I've been doing my physio and it hurts,
Right.
so
Oh,
I gotta take tablets, and it makes me sort of a bit tired.
Oh. Well, I took a nap before I went into Marks and Spencer in the
Oh,
that I
right,
got
yeah.
there because I was getting my spine, straightened and adjusted in the morning
Oh,
and visiting
when?
a friend. I got a friend that lives in Cardiff that I met on a river cruise. So
You're going tomorrow?
no, I went, yes, today.
Oh, you went? Oh my God.
Yeah, I did all that today. Yeah. shopping. That's why I had to have a nap at the designer outlet parking lot.
Oh,
Had lunch out in Clondaff. Very
Oh,
nice.
bloody hell, you go to more places than anyone.
I know.
that does, yeah.
While I can still drive, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. I don't blame you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh dear.
Right, are
And
we
just-
ready now?
Yeah, one question. Why did they need all this charcoal?
That's what we're just about to do.
Oh, good. Okay, I'll pay attention.
We could go.
I thought I missed something in the first half.
Well, no, we weren't doing this in the first half. We're doing something else, so don't worry about it.
Yeah,
It's
we
fine.
were doing like remnants. Oh no, sorry.
Field.
Rocks,
Do that.
rocks up on the
Do that.
bull.
What?
No, the bulk, the Regos.
There he goes.
Oh, all right.
Right now,
Mm.
we're going to go to good old Cumbria now, right? And one thing that one thing that archaeologists have realized over many years is that the way to understand archaeology is by reconstructing it. So what they did at a place known as Brockhole in Cumbria was to actually spend a week working out from the archaeological evidence and working out from old notes how you create a proper medieval, Anglo-Saxon, Iron Age, or whatever style charcoal burning locality. Right, so these are never to be the circular ones. So these are obviously going to be post Iron Age, but the principle is still there. And firstly, why make charcoal? There we go. We're going to answer this now.
Good.
Why? That's the first thing, Pat. You jumped it. The simple answer is that no other combustible substance generates the heat necessary for the forging of metals.
Mm.
By the
Ooh.
definition, from the 1900s, charcoal, basically what we're talking about is charcoal is in essence better than coal. It's far, but the difference between charcoal and mine coal, for example, is that charcoal has to be created by burning wood in the first place when mine coal can just be dug out of the ground. So the process basically consists of burning or literally charring wood at a very slow, controlled rate so that the combustion is never allowed to complete and thus turn the raw materials to ash. So in other words, it's
Really,
combusting it enough so that there's enough of the raw material to burn with all the liquids and everything out of it at the temperatures required. So this is achieved by controlling the amount of air involved in the reaction, basically covering the whole structure, otherwise known as a caboose. This is a caboose.
Oh,
A charcoal burning locality as it is. This is a caboose. This is a caboose covered in earth. Caboose, a caboose. It's first and last time you'll hear that terminology. The process takes up to a day and a half, over 30 hours for, say, for example, you're using 4 tons of wood to create 1 ton of charcoal, right? So basically, when you burn wood, it's no matter what you do with wood, it's still got moisture in it, and it's still got all the other stuff that is got rid of when you create charcoal. So that means that the combustion element is completely obsessed with burning what's left rather than everything else. So it creates a higher temperature. So what you need to do is dig a hole in the ground, which is known as a clamp, which might be several inches below the surface. which is approximately 3 meters in diameter. And then what you do is you've got to remove your sods of earth first. You've got to put them aside, right? This is all a process now. So you put your sods of earth over there, and then your next layer you create and you put over there. So sods of earth on the left, usually clay soil on the right. Now that stuff on the right, you've got to riddle through it, right? You've got to make sure that there's no big stones in it. Simply because if you allow stones left in the clamp at the bottom, and you leave stones in the sods of earth, and you leave stones in the soil over there, right? The soil over there is used for the sammal, the outer coating or covering of the caboose. Okay, you need a pen to write all this down to understand what the terminologies mean. So basically, if a stone is placed in the sammal, which is this protective covering above the shanks of wood in the caboose, right? That stone itself will hold moisture and will explode. That meaning that they will create a hole in the sammal, meaning that the lots of oxygen will rush in and will burn the wood, right? Equally, if you've got a stone on the floor in the pit stead, which is the clamp in the ground, that will explode, damaging the whole thing, known as the pit stead, right? So the next problem, what they did all this by practicing and working this out, because usually what you would do when you're creating in the Forest of Dean, this is the way they burn in the Forest of Dean. They don't actually produce clamps, right? Because the Forest of Dean is basically is like a clay soil and there's not much stones in it. So you can get away with that. In Cumbria, you've got lots of stones. That's the difference. This is why you create a hole in the ground, right? Like this. Yeah. So what they basically did, they needed industrial archaeologists to come in and help them with this whole process, because it's not as simple as that. Now, so basically the pit stead you've dug in the ground, which is your clamp, right? You then stack up the shanklings of wood. Let me show you, right? That is the stacking. Hang on. There's the shanklings of wood. They're being stacked up. And then what you then do is then there's a cross section of a shankling, right? Shankling stacked up, right? And this thing in the middle is the motty peg, right? Which we'll define what that is in a minute, back to the original drawing, right? So these are your motty pegs, right? So what it is, a motty peg is in the middle, right? So what you do is, as you're building this, you've got a motty peg, right? So you remove the motty peg, and then in the motty peg, you put charcoal and twigs used to start the fire. I didn't start the fire. That's the one. So basically, what you've got is then this whole process is that you've removed the motty peg, you've put charcoal and twigs in there, right? And then what you then do is you get, as that's now lit, right? You then get sods of earth on top of it. This is sods of earth on the left. Remember that? Sods of earth, you stack them on top, right? And then you allow the whole thing to smolder. You've got to reduce the amount of air in this structure, right? Which is, as we know, Anne, known as a caboose. But I've missed something along the way, right? So this is what you do to start the thing. The whole structure's already built, right? We've missed the other bit of the process, right? So what it is, we'll explain a little bit more about this before you remove the motty peg and you put the bits of you put the heated bits of charcoal up in there. So usually this whole process to create the shanklings of wood, okay, to dig the hole in the ground, to riddle the soil, this is going to take the best part of a day and a half to do this. So this is 4 tons of wood stacked up. So after you've riddled, which is the pile on the right, all the soil, you've got rid of all the gravel, right? You create the SAML. And the SAML itself is a compacted hood that you place around the outside of the shanklins to create a roof. But there's something very important that we've actually missed out. So what you can see at the bottom is a flip. So let's just so as you're building all of this up, right, you allow a little flip. In other words, you allow a little bit of a gap, right? You allow a little bit of a gap, right? So this gap itself is roughly no more than 8 inches above ground level, and this whole thing itself, the pile of wood is over 5 foot high, so it's a meter and a half high, right? So it could be taller than that, but it's fair. You've got to remember cover all of this, right? So you've got the flip. So what happens? Let me explain the process. I'm just going to blow my nose. So then what you've got directly above the this shanklins of wood, you've got a bracken covering, and then that then supports this clay, this earthen top above it, which has obviously the clay's been moistened and it's created this nice little hood on top, right? And then I've already explained about the motty peg being removed. You put the bits of charcoal and you put the bit of turf over it, and then the whole thing is smouldering, and that's going to take a day and a half to smoulder, right? So the one thing about all of this, process is you've got to stay with it. Now, the flip itself allows a little bit of oxygen into the burning process, but eventually, the SAML itself is going to drop over the flip, right? When it drops over the flip, the oxygen that's in it is the only oxygen that's going to be in there, right? And that oxygen then eventually starts to die out. So it's slowly smouldering. It's slowly smouldering. Now, there's a key to all of this. There's a big key to all of this. Now, even though you're trying to reduce oxygen, right, and you cap the whole thing off with turfs and stuff, you've got to be very wary in the Forest of Dean with these open ones. You've got windbreaks. You've got to try and stop the wind, trying to get into the gaps of the flip underneath, right? Yeah, you've got to try and stop as much of this breeze. This is counteracted by having a hole in the ground by building this up, because the wind has to sort of go along from the horizon, go under and go up. But by having these things built on the surface, that's the disadvantage. You've got to try and stop the wind as much as possible. It will get through that, it will get through. So anyway, going over to this now, they're all sat there nicely, right? The one thing that you've got to do is you've got to make sure that there's no holes opening up in the caboose, because if there does, oxygen drives in, and that's what happens. The whole thing sets alight. So what you're going to end up with ash. You've got to stay with it for a day and a half. It's okay if it rains, right? It's fine, because you've got this outer hood on it, right? But you've got to make sure that there are no cracks developing in this. It's very, very important that you don't allow that. So this has to be done every single time that you create these structures, right? So what you've got to do next is you've got to watch how tall the mound is after a day and a half, right? So if the mound itself has dropped by 2 foot, that means that the burning process has done its job. So what do you do next? You need buckets and buckets and buckets of water, and you need 2 people. And you can't do it with high wind. So what you've got, I think that we got this. Oh, there we go. Um, oh no, that's not very helpful at all. But it's a medieval illustration. But what you've got is you've got one person breaking the salmon open. And then as they're breaking the salmon open, you've got to make sure that the whole thing doesn't ignite. It's really important. You've got to have two people working together. This is after a day and a half. So you've got buckets and buckets of water. So what you then do is you douse the thing with several hundred gallons of water, and cover the whole cover the whole lot where you've made the gap with more of this clay earth. So what's going to happen is as the water's going to be dragged into the charcoal, right? And that means that the charcoal is not going to ignite again until it's dried out. So what will happen is that slowly but surely for another 24 hours, the whole process, it all starts to die down. Even though there's a lot of water in there, right? There's still a lot of heat. An exothermic reaction will be taking place, basically, where water is seen as a catalyst to aid the burning, but without oxygen, creating more of the charcoal. Right. So what they found was that the temperature that was in this a charcoal burner was actually over 700 degrees C, right? 700 degrees C. So what you've then got is a 5-foot mound, which is now slowly being reduced to 3 foot, and then to 2 foot. And then, lo and behold, what you do, you break open the top of the salmon, and all the charcoal should be in a nice roasted state, which should eventually be charcoal that you can actually use in a barbecue, or charcoal that you can actually use in a furnace. So this is the whole thing. So now what you've got left is the roasted wood. This is very important that you've got the roasted wood. And where there is another word that I haven't actually given to you, right? As you're breaking open the salmon, right? So this is what's happening there. They're breaking out the salmon, so their water's being added into there. You know, it's all, and then you cover it back up again. So there's another word, right? When you're raking and adding water to it, you're saying, right? You're saying it. So in other words, you're saying, when you're adding water, you're saying it. Another word, tipping loads of water, you're saying it. And this is very important, that the sade material is actually the roasted wood that you can actually eventually use for charcoal. So all of this is really, really important stuff. So the roast, in this case, had created a yield of the charcoal required. So apparently, when they were undertaking this in Cumbria, it was a reenactment group called Regio Anglorum, right? And they do Anglo-Saxon stuff. When they were doing this process to try and understand what they were doing, they basically went to a local blacksmith in Cumbria and basically said, "Could you use our charcoal, right, in your furnace, right, in a blacksmith, right?" And the blacksmith took some of the charcoal. He said, "This is some of the finest charcoal that I've seen." So basically, the blacksmith took all the charcoal and used it. Apparently, it was really good. And Anglo Anglorum actually, as a blacksmith, as a thank you to Anglo Anglorum for all the charcoal, made them some really nice replica some really nice replica swords. Now, there is something else about this. What do you do with a hole in the ground? Well, I didn't. I had no idea of this, but the hole in the ground, if it's in an area where there's lots of clay, what's happened is that as they've removed all the charcoal or most of the charcoal, what they're left with is a hole which is really clay and very muddy and boggy. And actually, you actually make that into pottery. And there's going to be lots of flecks of charcoal in it, but the stuff left in the pit, which is your really clay, boggy, watery bits of charcoal, that can then be turned into pottery. And there's a name for all that mud that is made into pottery. It's known as a scroll. So the stuff in that pit, that clay, that sort of stuff that you actually make into pottery, is actually known as the scroll. So the whole thing, when they were experimenting in this archaeology, and I'm glad I did it this way, the whole thing itself took them 5 days. To create 1 ton of charcoal, it took them 5 days. And to be honest with you, I think 1 ton of charcoal today would, if you're going to sell it privately, that's quite a lot of money, to be honest with you. But it's a lot of effort. And having access to 4 tons of wood in the first place, you've got to have your own woodland, like the Forest of Dean. So, sorry about this. So one last thing I'm going to mention is the terminology charcoal, and I think I got the terminology here. Here we go. The word charcoal or coal comes from the Anglo-Saxon. So C-O-L, often taken to mean coal, C-O-A-L, which could be referred to as mineral coal, which is actually what you mine. However, actually, coal, in the broadest term, meant charcoal. So may you be consumed as charcoal on the fire. Mineral coal was called sea coal because back then, the coal that was available to most people would have been collected at the sea side, right? So that was known as sea coal, but technically your charcoal was known as coal because it was found on beaches. Only the monks at Margam actually dug for it from about 1054. That's a generalization because we know that coal is being mined a lot earlier than that, particularly in the Roman period as well. However, I wanted to give you an idea of the terminology. So coal is broadly used occasionally to mean mineral coal, but is generally used to refer to as charcoal. And actually, I know Richard is thinking this. In Barry, there's a place known as Coal Farm, which might refer to charcoal farm and not coal farm, referring to sea coal. But that's just an idea. So what we're going to do, and then that's a bit of an example from France. So I'll just generally go through sort of a medieval illustration there. And these are the typical sort of Forest of Dean ones. I know this illustration is for over 100 years old, but they're still doing it today. This is an example of the type of Forest and Dean type of ones, but this is from France. So on a flat surface, looks like a big cake. That's when they're starting to add the water to it. So they're saying the water onto it, and they're going to eventually rake it out to create this wonderful charcoal. And there we are, preparing the caboose in the pitstead. Right. So one last thing I wanted to do to sort of give a load of variety tonight is just this. We've got a tiny little bit of time, and Richard said he's got to go at 9, so we'll try and get this in here. I just wanted to mention something that we last night we visited briefly this site known as Llyn Cerrig up in Anglesey. And when they were building an airbase known as RAF Valley within these wetlands, they actually come across a hoard of all these artifacts, over 180 eventually. And these ended up on display in the National Museum of Wales, and it was found in the height of the war. So what they were doing, they were digging out sort of peat and stuff out this boggy landscape, and they were using it to build up the land to create the runways at the airbase in 1942, 1943. And there were lots more artifacts that were just which were just discarded. And this may have actually been a sort of a sacred lake into the other world. That's like a copper. I think that's a copper shield boss actually. So these finds are primarily military and included 11 swords, 5 statues of Lloyd George in copper, 8 spearheads, and parts of a parade shield. That's what that is there. And these are all Iron Age. And they reckon that there was across the 180 items, they reckon there was probably bits from up to 22 chariots that they found in regards to all the 180 items that they found. So it's very likely that this hoard dates, it may be all the way up to the earliest part of the years after the birth of Christ, running up to the Roman period. And it says about the Llyn Cerrig assemblage is one of the most important collections of La Tène metalwork discovered in the British Isles. So La Tène, Switzerland, this is like a style. It's like the type of stuff they get in Switzerland, like the type of stuff we get here. A total of 180 iron, copper, alloy artifacts are known to have been recovered from the airfield, of which all but 4 are now in the collection of the National Museum of Wales. And one expert from the National Museum, the Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monuments, a chap by the name of Toby Driver, 2023, he says that the Iron Age landscape was alive with places of religious and sacred significance. The hoarding of prestige metalwork, including swords, weapons, and valuable metalworker scrap, has been taking place since, for example, the Bronze Age, into the Iron Age across Western Europe. And Llyn Cerrig back on Anglesey. So obviously, when they constructed this, they were mechanically digging out of the wetlands, and many people thought that some of the objects may have been discarded as they were digging out the wetlands. And interesting enough, there was finally a field work project by Operation Nightingale. Now, Operation Nightingale is an organisation which is a military led organisation led by Richard Osgood of the Defence Infrastructure Organisation, with involvement of organisations across Wales. And basically, as they were looking into the muds, the peat from the lake, they actually found other objects, including bits of chariot rings known as terret rings, and including a wonderful object which was inlaid with red enamel. So they actually found more objects. And this year, I think they were there in April. They hopefully that'll be produced soon, and more of these objects will be on display. And just one quick thing about this before we finish. The bar currency, there's one by there. That's not a sword. Interesting enough, we said that the bar currency wasn't found in many places other than southern England, but there's one on the left. We've got a sword here, another sword. Look at that there. My God, that looks like the type of thing that Richard may have used in the garage when he was working there in the 80s and 90s. And you've got a socketed spearhead here. 180 objects altogether. There's a bit of a shield boss there. And then these chains here. Now that debatable what these are actually specifically used for. But I think that's going to be a horse bit there. That's going to be the snaffle guide in the horse's mouth, isn't it? In the middle bit, and those are going to be the reins there. Some wonderful objects. So I just wanted to give that to you tonight as an extra bit from the Iron Age. Obviously, more from the Iron Age next week.
Oh, thank
So
you.
let's see now if there's any questions. We'll go with Richard first because he's got to go first. So, and I'm gonna go and inspect my sheep. But one thing I'm gonna show you, right, is this image, this illustration here. You see that there? There's a big pile of stones.
Mm.
Hang on a minute. Let's get that up there. There's a big pile of stones there. That was excavated in the 1970s, and that was a Manpower Services excavation. And they say that there was, it was a pile. It was a Khan pile of stones, right? And they tried. They wanted it to be an Iron Age or Bronze Age mound of stones, but it's likely it was just a pile of stones in a field. So be very careful with when you see things like this. Right, okay then, Richard.
Yeah, very interesting. Very good.
Thank you very much, Richard. If you need to go, Richard, twaddle off.
I'm away now.
Bye, Richard.
No,
Bye-bye.
Richard.
Bye.
No, Richard.
Bye.
No. Right, okay then. Henry, anything you want to say?
No, nothing to add to that. It was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. Okay, Pat, anything from you?
No, really enjoyed it. Yes. And I meant to tell you that you and I went to Newborough Nature Reserve and Beach, which is in Anglesey.
Yes,
And I
we
went
did.
to Bryn Kellich Dowie do
Bring Ketley thee.
Yeah. Renee and I went to both those places. We went up north. So I thought of you and our trip. So it was great.
And when you went to up north, did you go to the little harbour at Amlook as well?
No.
That's
What's
the
it
one that
called?
we went. You and I went there, but you didn't go there on your trip. But you and I went there. Kathy was there on that one as well. So,
And what was the name of the beach?
that was Amlook, the harbour in the north. That's another one
Oh,
we went
yes,
to.
way
Amlook.
north. I remember because she
Yeah.
wanted to go there.
Yes, she did. She did.
Right,
The copper port, exactly.
Yeah, we did go to Cricket Castle. She loved that. And
Prickieth Castle. Yes.
yes, that's it. And we stayed in Port Madog for 3 nights. It was great fun.
You stayed at Port Madog, eh? All right.
Yeah, in a little place, Airbnb above the big Rock Cafe. It's a cafe that
I
had
think
fresh bread.
I know that.
Yeah.
That's on the bend in the road, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
that's the one.
Wonderful, yeah. It's really
Yeah.
great.
As somebody used to refer to. Go on, carry on.
I was just going to say, I recommend a trip north. Last year we went to Conway and Carmarthen Castle, so that was the 2 we went then. But yeah, we have great fun. She likes beaches and castles, so that's all we go to. But I did get her to go to a chambered,
Has she gone back?
The
What?
Chamber
Has she gone back?
Oh yeah, 2 weeks.
All right.
Back last week ago.
2 weeks was enough.
Yeah.
Ah, she works.
Yes.
And you went to the fort with us up there, the Roman fort.
Oh yes, I remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wasn't interested, so we didn't go there.
No, fair enough.
And that was
Okay.
great. That's what we went to first, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know
and
where we stayed. We stayed somewhere under the bridge, as far as I can remember.
Just over the bridge, across the Menai Straits, I think. I can't remember. It was probably closed now, probably. It was a weird place that, because it had all long, windy corridors, if I can remember.
Yeah. Oh, we did go to Abersoch.
Abersoch, yes.
Yeah.
Nice, Abersoch. I've
And
been
one
there.
other one, I can't figure out where. But
I've been to Amlock as well, but on holiday.
yeah, great.
And but I was going to say about what you did tonight. Is that what we thought they were votive offerings at one time, didn't we? But now that's not really
No, it's not.
Please.
It's not. When I was reading out what the archaeologist said, and we weren't actually doing it as a subject. We didn't actually have any discussion on that. That's what. It's just the problem is now where there could have been lots of reasons why they're there on lots of
Yeah,
different levels. And remember, they've been deposited over there a long time. So
yeah.
there's lots of
Reason.
directions that we could go. Yeah, lots of reasons.
Okay.
Lots of reasons. Right. Anything else you want to say, Pat?
No, thank you.
No. What about anything else from you, Anne?
No, thanks. Just interesting, you know.
I'm fine. Okay, thank you. And anything you want to say, Henry, before we dive off?
No, thank you very much. See you all
Yes,
next
thank
week.
you.
Oh,
Okay.
there was
Thank you.
only one. There was only one thing I did
Go
this
on,
week.
Anne, quick.
Somebody was talking about Egypt and Ireland, an Egyptian princess going to Ireland, and then this Irish bloke said, "Ridiculous, ridiculous." And I said, "Oh well, I can tell you there is a link between Egypt and Ireland, and well, those guys were doing that Toulouse, wasn't it? Was it Toulouse, the goddess of the Tara Hill?
Oh, Tara
know.
Hill. See, Tara Hill. Yes.
Yeah, and it's connected to Egypt. Yeah, Egyptian
Oh,
god.
well, Henry will know all
For
about
a
that.
long time ago, you know, I mean, we are talking about a long
I know it's a long
ago.
time ago. It's not last week.
Anyway,
Yeah, there is
Ah.
a bit of, there is a story of a ancient princess from Egypt coming to Ireland.
yes. And they were saying, these people, this person was saying that that they may have been Jews. A lot of Jews came
Oh my
looking-
God, no!
looking for the Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant.
well
Yeah,
as
I know,
Wales. As well as Wales. Anyway,
Well,
never mind.
exactly. I would say one last thing. I was along the road the other day, and the neighbour come up. They said, "Oh, those two people who are traipsing across our land the other week." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Who?" They said, "Well, um, they said they were asking for you, and they said, what do you think of Mr. Langford? Because we don't like him at all. You know, he says all this stuff on the internet, right?" And these were the same two people who had the who had the gumption, right, to jump over my gate when we got a security thing saying, "Don't do this," right? And they come on my land and they say, "Right, we've got every right to be on your land because this is where King Arthur's buried." And the other woman said, "Jesus Christ is buried here as well." And I'm thinking, oh my God.
Oh, they got the wrong place.
You
Well,
need
no,
to move.
apparently they're saying this is the thing, because we've got Bethlehem and Jerusalem and Shiloh and all these weird places in West Wales, right?
Yeah.
It's proof that Jesus Christ
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
It might, you know, might have. There is a story.
Yeah, right, let's know more.
All right then. Right. So go on.
All right, we're going now. I'll see you next week then,
Okay,
folks.
bye.
Have a good
Bye.
week.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Night night, Anne, Pat,
Bye.
and Henry. Night night.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Night night, folks. Night night. Night night. Night night. Night night.
No, 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 no.
Night night. Night night. Night night. No 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 no. I am knackered. Actually, I'm under the weather now. I don't know why. I got some kind of virus again. Night night, dodgy git. Do you know the Forest of Dean? Well, don't go with the dodgy git, Emma. It's just wouldn't be good. Bye, Richard. Night night, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm just going to look in the chat box. I'm going to have something quick tweet, and I'm just going to have a quick look at the animals, and then I've got to puddle off back to South Wales. I'm waiting for the van to be sorted out. New engine. Get home. Shit, I gotta get home. I'm gonna have something to eat quickly. Feed the cats. I'm gonna go. Right, so right, let's oh God. Look in the chat box before I cuddle off. Nothing in the chat box 1, nothing in the chat box 2, nothing in that chat box 3. Why has nobody put anything in that chat box? Nothing in that chat box. Why are there different boxes? Nothing there. Nothing there. 1. Nothing that 2, 3,